I was a simple honest man. They thought the forged signature would bury me. Instead, it buried them. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Sylvan Durrell. I am 72 years old, a grandfather of 3, and the last living keeper of a farm my family carved out of the Oklahoma soil almost a century ago. My father, Henry, fought in Korea before returning home and spending his last breath tilling these fields. His father, my grandfather, Tobias, built the first house on this land with his own 2 hands, timber cut from the nearby grove and nails he salvaged from torn-down barns. And me? I spent my life with calluses, not college degrees. I wasn't brilliant. I wasn't rich. But I never missed a planting season, and I never let the bank take so much as a fence post. I raised 2 children here with my wife, Eleanor, before she passed 15 years ago. This farm wasn't just land. It was blood, history, and the only thing that made me feel like I still had a place in the world. Eleanor used to call it the kingdom. She'd laugh when she said it, standing on the porch with flowers still on her apron, watching me wrestle a busted tractor into working again. A kingdom of wheat and mud, I'd joke back. But she was right. This soil was richer than gold. It had kept us fed, clothed, and alive when everything else seemed to crumble. That was what I intended to pass on to my family. A kingdom, humble though it was. A place where my grandchildren could always return, even when the world outside chewed them up. But kingdoms are the first things greedy men try to steal. And my own son, Malcolm, was the greedy man in this story. When Eleanor died, I thought the worst pain of my life had already happened. Malcolm stood beside me at the funeral, hand on my shoulder, whispering that he'd take care of me. I believed him. He was my boy, my firstborn, the one who used to follow me into the fields, begging to ride the tractor, who once told his teacher in 3rd grade that his father was a giant who could fix anything. I should have noticed when that boy disappeared and a different Malcolm took his place. Somewhere between his failed business ventures, his expensive tastes, and his sour marriage, he decided the farm wasn't a legacy, it was loot. And I didn't see it until it was almost too late. It all began the day the bank mailed me a letter, polite words, typed neatly on heavy paper, informing me that I had recently authorized the transfer of my farm into Malcolm's name. I remember reading it at the kitchen table, the same table Eleanor had polished every Sunday, and laughing, actually laughing, because surely it was a clerical mistake. Surely no one thought I'd just hand over my life's work without so much as a conversation. But when I took that letter to the bank the next morning, I discovered the truth. There it was. My signature. My name in the familiar slant I had written for decades. Smooth, neat, confident, only it wasn't mine. It was a younger man's hand. The way I used to sign before arthritis stiffened my fingers and the years carved tremors into my bones. The realization hit me like a hammer to the chest. My own son had forged me. Most mornings I rise before the sun, the way I have since I was a boy. The house is too quiet now, no Eleanor humming in the kitchen, no clatter of pans or the scent of coffee drifting through the hall. So I make the coffee myself, strong, black, and bitter, and sit at the table that has hosted 50 years of breakfasts, arguments, Christmas feasts, and late-night confessions. The place is worn, but it's mine. A grandfather clock ticks in the corner, slow and steady, as if reminding me that I'm still here, still standing. I keep Eleanor's apron hanging on the pantry door. Some mornings I find myself touching it like she's still around, as though the soft cotton can anchor me to a world that keeps shifting beneath my feet. The farm doesn't need me the way it once did. The tractors do most of the heavy work now, and I hire 2 young men from town to help during planting season. Still, I walk the fields every day. The earth speaks to you if you pay attention, the smell of dampness before rain, the crunch of stalks when the soil is too dry, the restless wind before a storm. Out there, I still feel like the giant my boy once saw me as. Out there, I'm not just an old man. But when I come back to the house, reality closes in. Bills pile up on the counter, utilities, insurance, endless paper demanding signatures. I've always been meticulous about them, a habit Eleanor praised and Malcolm mocked. "Dad," he'd say with that little smirk of his, "you keep every receipt like it's treasure. No one cares about paper." Funny thing is, that's exactly what he ended up stealing from me, paper. I should have known something was wrong months before that letter from the bank arrived. There were little things, documents missing from the filing cabinet in my study, envelopes open that I was sure I hadn't touched, my checkbook misplaced. Once, I even found my notary stamp out of place, tucked under a pile of tax returns. When I asked Malcolm about it, he waved it off. "Relax, Dad. You probably forgot where you put it. Happens at your age." "At my age." He said it with a smile, like a joke, but I saw the calculation behind his eyes. And then came the Sunday he showed up with a six-pack and an eager grin, insisting I sign a routine refinance form he claimed would lower my insurance rates. I told him to leave it on the counter, that I'd read it later. When I did, the language was thick with legal jargon, but one sentence caught my eye: transfer of beneficial interest. I confronted him about it. He laughed and said, "Dad, it's boilerplate. Just trust me." I didn't sign. That night, I locked the form in my desk drawer. Looking back now, I realize that was the draft. The rehearsal. The forgery he perfected later. The first time I allowed myself to admit something was very wrong was on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after that refinance form incident. I had driven into town for feed and stopped by the county clerk's office to renew the registration on the farm's water rights. Routine business, something Eleanor and I had done every few years. The clerk, a young woman who knew me by name, frowned as she typed into her computer. "Mr. Durrell," she said carefully, "according to our records, you already renewed these rights last month." "Actually," she clicked again. "It looks like you transferred management of the rights to your son, Malcolm." I felt the blood leave my face. "I did no such thing." She hesitated, then reached under the counter and pulled out a file. Inside was a single sheet with my signature at the bottom. My name, clean and steady. Not the jagged, halting script my hands now produced, but the hand I'd had at 50. I stared at it, and for a long moment, I couldn't breathe. "Do you want me to photocopy this for you?" the clerk asked gently, as though she'd just delivered news of a death. I nodded. My voice wouldn't work. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the paper under the lamp, comparing it to old letters I'd written Eleanor when she was in the hospital. The loops, the slant, the pressure on the ink, it was me, and it wasn't. It was a ghost of me, resurrected by someone who knew my hand as well as I did. And then I remembered. The misplaced checkbook. The opened envelopes. The missing notary stamp. Malcolm's smug grin when I questioned him. He'd been practicing. He'd been building my handwriting the way a thief studies blueprints before a heist. The fury that rose in me was like nothing I'd felt since the day I buried Eleanor. Not even when the drought nearly ruined us in '81, not when the bank threatened foreclosure in '95. This was worse. Because this wasn't the world attacking me. This was my own blood. I called Malcolm the next morning. "Son," I said evenly, "we need to talk. Face to face." He came over that evening, swaggering into the house like he owned it already. He even helped himself to a beer from my fridge before sitting down across from me. "What's on your mind, Dad?" I slid the photocopied document across the table. His eyes flicked down, then back up at me, and in that instant, I knew. He didn't even bother pretending shock. Instead, he leaned back, smirk tugging at his lips. "Maybe it's time you stopped worrying about paperwork. You're 72, Dad. The farm needs someone who can handle things." "Handle things?" My voice was quiet, but the words cut. "You mean steal them?" He laughed. Laughed. "Don't be dramatic. It's all staying in the family. Isn't that what Mom always wanted? I stared at him for a long time. That was when I knew Eleanor's kingdom wasn't safe in his hands. He'd already decided I was dead weight. So I nodded slowly, as though I accepted it. Maybe you're right, Malcolm. Maybe I've held on too long. His grin widened. He thought he'd won. But in that moment, I began planning the one thing he didn't expect, to make him choke on the very paperwork he thought would bury me. When Malcolm left that night, beer bottle still sweating on the table, I sat there long after the sound of his truck had faded down the gravel drive. My hands trembled, but not from age. It was rage, and something else, something sharper. I had spent my life keeping this farm alive through storms, pests, droughts, and bank threats. I'd survived war, buried my wife, and raised 2 children on honest labor. Did Malcolm really think a few forged lines of ink would undo me? No. If he wanted a game of paper, I would play it better. The first step was proof. Not my word against his, but ironclad evidence. I still had friends in town, and one of them, old Corbett at the law firm, pointed me toward a forensic document examiner 2 counties over. A wiry woman with sharp glasses and sharper eyes. She took the photocopy, then asked for samples of my real handwriting. I gave her everything, Eleanor's letters, old ledgers, even grocery lists. When she slid the report back across the desk weeks later, her verdict was clear: forgery. Not just careless imitation. This was practiced. Rehearsed. Exactly what I suspected. The second step was bait. If Malcolm was so confident in his craft, I would give him the chance to forge again, and catch him red-handed. I began planting the idea during our phone calls, telling him I was considering selling the back acres along the highway. Prime land, valuable to developers. I knew his greed too well, it would blind him. "Dad, that's smart," he said, voice too eager. "If you want, I can handle the paperwork. Make sure you get the best deal." I agreed with a smile he couldn't see. "We'll talk about it soon." The third step was preparation. I gathered my documents, deeds, titles, Eleanor's original will, and locked them away in a fireproof box under the floorboards. I made new certified copies at the courthouse, stamped and sealed, with dates impossible to dispute. And I began meeting quietly with Corbett. We drew up affidavits, power of attorney clauses, and instructions for the bank. Every paper Malcolm thought he'd trick me with, I had already tripled and notarized. The trap was almost ready. But I needed one more thing: silence. I couldn't tip him off by confronting him again. So when he visited, I played the role of the frail, confused old man. I let him explain things in that condescending tone, let him bring me draft documents he claimed were routine. Each time, I tucked them away without signing, while he left believing I was one step closer to surrender. What he didn't know was that I was collecting them. Layer by layer, I was building a case file so thick that no judge could ignore it. And then, one evening, the perfect opportunity came. Over dinner, Malcolm leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Dad, about those back acres. I went ahead and talked to a developer. They're interested. All we need is your authorization. I'll bring the form this week." He thought he was leading me into his snare. But I smiled and nodded. "That sounds fine, son. Bring the papers. I'll be ready." He didn't know that the only thing I'd be ready with was the rope to hang him. The day Malcolm brought the papers, the sky was heavy with storm clouds. The air felt swollen, ready to split open, and I remember thinking it was a fitting backdrop for what was about to unfold. He arrived in his polished truck, the kind of vehicle a man buys when he wants people to believe he's doing better than he is. He didn't knock, just strolled in, grinning like a banker on commission, a leather folder tucked under his arm. "Here we are," he said, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. The same table where Eleanor once rolled pie dough and where Malcolm had done his homework as a boy. Now it was his battlefield. This is just authorization, he explained, tapping at the signature line with a manicured finger. Simple stuff. You sign, I take it to the developer, and boom, we're swimming in money. I leaned forward, squinting like an old man straining to read. My hands shook just enough to look natural. And you're sure this is all above board, son? Of course, he said smoothly. You've got to trust me, Dad. Trust. The word nearly choked me. I picked up the pen, rolling it slowly between my fingers, pretending to hesitate. Malcolm's eyes glittered, hungry, watching my hand. That was when I slid the top paper slightly aside, just enough to reveal the camera lens hidden in the bookshelf across the room. My lawyer had set it up 2 days prior, recording every second of this meeting. Tell me again what this is, I said, my voice steady. Malcolm sighed, impatient, but repeated his lie. Transfer of authorization. Nothing more. It lets me act on your behalf with the developer. Saves you the hassle. And you'll handle everything for me? I asked. He smiled. Exactly. I nodded, set the pen down, and pushed the papers back toward him. Then you'd better sign for me. My hands aren't what they used to be. For just a second, his expression flickered, surprise, hesitation. Then arrogance smothered it. He reached over, picked up the pen, and in one smooth motion, signed my name. Perfectly. I watched the crime happen in real time, his practiced hand carving my ghost into ink. When he finished, he leaned back with a satisfied grin. There. Clean and simple. I let the silence hang. Then I reached under the table and placed the recorder, still blinking red, on the stack of papers. His grin faltered. Malcolm, I said quietly, you just forged my name in front of a witness. 2, if you count the camera. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I slid open the drawer beside me and dropped the forensic examiner's report onto the table. The stamped affidavit from Corbett followed. Then copies of every suspicious draft he'd left behind over the past 6 months. You thought I was confused. Weak. Easy to trick. But the only thing you've proven today, I said, leaning forward, is that you're a criminal, and a fool. He stammered, trying to gather the papers, but I pressed my palm flat over them. Don't bother. These go to the county attorney tomorrow morning. Along with the video. The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of Eleanor's old clock on the wall. Finally, I stood, towering over him the way I hadn't since he was a boy. You wanted to take my farm with a pen, Malcolm. Instead, you just signed away your freedom. He left without another word, face gray, folder clutched tight like a shield. But the damage was already done. By the end of the month, the forged transfers were voided, the farm secured under my name, and Malcolm's accounts frozen while the investigation rolled forward. My lawyer said prison time was likely. At the very least, he would never lay claim to this land again. I stood on the porch one evening, watching the storm finally break over the fields, rain soaking into the soil. Eleanor had once called this place a kingdom. Tonight, I realized she was right. And every kingdom needs its defender. The courthouse smelled of varnish and damp coats, the kind of smell that clings to old wood and older lies. I sat in the second row, hands folded on my cane, while Malcolm shuffled in with his lawyer. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, suit hanging off him like it belonged to another man. The judge called the case, voice echoing through the chamber. Evidence was laid out, page after page of signatures, the forensic examiner's report, the video of Malcolm smoothly carving my name onto paper that wasn't his to touch. Each time the screen lit up with his hand in motion, I saw him sink a little lower into his chair. The arrogance that once radiated off him like heat was gone, replaced by something thinner, weaker, fear. When the prosecution rested, the judge asked if the defense had anything to add. Malcolm's lawyer whispered frantically, but my son only shook his head. He didn't even look at me. The gavel struck wood. Transfers voided. Criminal charges pending. Accounts frozen. And the words I'd waited months to hear, Mr. Sylvan Durrell remains the sole legal owner of the farm. Iris was waiting outside the courtroom. She had her mother's eyes, Eleanor's eyes, and I saw the shine of tears in them as she reached for my hand. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling, "I didn't know he'd gone this far. I knew Malcolm was reckless, but, forgery. Against his own father." I squeezed her hand. "You knew enough to keep your distance, Iris. That's more than I can say for myself. I wanted to believe he was still the boy who used to ride the tractor with me. But that boy's long gone." She shook her head, looking back toward the courtroom doors. "He always thought he was owed something. That you loved me more, because I stayed. He let that fester until it turned into this." I studied her face, the sorrow there, and for a moment my anger softened. Not toward Malcolm, but toward what greed had done to my family. It had taken my son and twisted him until I barely recognized him. Still, as I stepped out into the sharp winter air, cane clicking against the stone steps, I felt no guilt. Only relief. Eleanor's kingdom was safe. The farm was quiet the morning after the trial. A light frost clung to the stubble in the fields, sparkling in the first sun like a crown on the land. I stood on the porch with my coffee, the mug warm in my hand, and listened to the stillness that only old soil can hold. Iris pulled into the drive just after breakfast, her children tumbling out of the car, boots crunching across the gravel. My youngest granddaughter, Clara, ran straight to me, arms outstretched. I lifted her, knees aching but heart full, and she giggled the way Eleanor used to when I spun her in the kitchen. "Grandpa," she asked, eyes wide, "is this our farm now too?" I looked past her to the horizon, where the field stretched golden and endless, and I felt the weight of generations behind me, my father, my grandfather, Eleanor herself. All of them had kept this place alive, and now it was my turn to make sure the next hands were worthy of it. "Yes, Clara," I said, my voice steady. "This will always be ours. But not because of papers or signatures. Because we work for it. Because we respect it." Iris met my gaze from the porch, and in her look I saw what Malcolm could never understand, gratitude, not entitlement. The children chased each other between the trees, laughter echoing across the fields, and I felt the land breathe easier, as if it, too, had been waiting for this moment. And with the winter sun warming my face, I realized something Malcolm never had. The true revenge wasn't that I kept the farm. It was that he had lost it forever.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.